Okay, so Rayford, one of the things that you mentioned in particular was how, and Smitty talked about too, there's been a lot of talk about how important rates is and what the potential is that this will impact rates. So the question is, what is this going to cost and how are you going to pay for it?
Thank you. One of the reasons why we really asked for flexibility in the rulemaking is that, since each utility is kind of in its own unique position, whether it's its location, its availability of fuel, the age of its fleet, not every utility has the same capability to do the same things. That being said, and Smitty just reminded me here that we've actually defrayed doing another rate case here thanks to a lot of these initiatives. I always used to find this an entertaining topic when I would go try and convince other customers to adopt energy efficiency. I would say, you can actually lower your costs and improve your margins to your customer, by using energy efficiency. Don't you want to do that? And they would always tell me, no. But I look at CPS, and I have made this argument before, actually the more energy efficiency that we promote, actually the more efficient our assets are allowed to be, right? You can actually make them live longer. Living longer means I don't have to spend more money up front to go replace them, and I can actually make the asset live a lot longer and, of course, get those benefits. I look at energy efficiency as actually creating optionality on the grid, right? And that's, I think, a lot of what we're trying to do. Battery storage, renewables, they all help create optionality on the grid. And I look forward and thinking about this and think, okay, so there's some things that could cost a lot of money. There are, undoubtedly. There are also other things that could cost a lot less or could actually benefit us. How do we find the right mix of these things? At CPS, I think we found a good mix between what we're doing with renewables, what we're doing with gas-fired generation, our emphasis on nuclear, and certainly what we're doing in terms of the energy efficiency and demand response space. It's that mixture of things, I think, that's the right level for us to do, and I think that's the way we'll actually minimize rates and actually make the target.
Great, thank you.
And let me just comment on something else that Rayford mentioned. That is that they have done so in ways that create substantial jobs. Their decision to set a goal of 400 megawatts of solar and do a public-private partnership didn't come with just the good feelings that you're going to do solar. They did it because that was cheaper than doing a lot of other things. But they also said if you come, you have to hire 800 people in the San Antonio area and put them to work, train them up, and they're family-raising jobs. This isn't doing assembly line stuff at the chicken plucking plant. This is real work that's enough to pay people a living wage. Similarly, the energy efficiency program has taken hundreds of young children or young people and put them to work, given them careers, and has enabled them to raise their family and stay in San Antonio. In addition, in speccing their demand-side management program, they said you got to move your headquarters here and put people to work in San Antonio. They also said we're going to change out our streetlights, but you got to move your manufacturing plant here, and as a result, that has used the Commonwealth of people in San Antonio, their utility bills, and reinvested it back in the community, and that's a model we can use in the rest of the state. Instead of shipping $1.85 billion a year to Wyoming for coal, we could invest that amount of money back in Texas and put people to work here.
You can, we'll tell you what, let me have this one back. Let's see if I can give you guys this one.
All right.
We're just trying to keep this interesting for y'all. Let me ask one more question to follow up on that one. Because CPS is an integrated utility, and a major portion of the state are served by unbundled utilities in competitive areas. And so I would like to ask first Rayford, and then any other comments, to what extent and how might we be able to transfer lessons from CPS, who's obviously got a forward-looking business case ready to go for this, to some of these other unbundled utilities around the state?
Sure, and I would like to go back to at least one of the first jokes I made, which was that death, taxes, and change are inevitable. Really, the hardest thing I ever found about my job in terms of technology or energy efficiency or even being an attorney wasn't the actual day-to-day grind. It was the change, right? It was trying to convince people that you could do something different, and that actually could be beneficial. And I would say that the biggest benefit or the biggest lesson learned that I would pass on is not to run from change, not to fight change, but to actually turn around and embrace it and figure out ways to profit from it and grow from it. Just as we've done in the city of San Antonio, I think there are ample opportunities to do that elsewhere. I spent 23 of my 24 years in the investor-owned utility world. I understand those difficult choices they have to make, and we were both vertically and deregulated, vertically integrated and deregulated. It can be done. It can be done, and it can be done well. And I would say, embrace the change.
So one of the other issues that we face in Texas is when we deregulated, we put up these corporate and financial firewalls between the transmission distribution utilities, the generators, and the retailers. And so so you can't just, if you say you're Energy Futures Holdings and you produce 40% of the carbon and you're having a hard time figuring out how to reduce your emissions, you just can't reach over and give Oncor $500 million to do energy efficiency. So what we're suggesting is that we create some kind of a mechanism over at ERCOT, a market-based mechanism that would allow the generators who can't comply to come up with some way to fund energy efficiency and do it just like we do everything else over at ERCOT, make the utilities compete for who gets to buy the energy efficiency credits. So if there's $500 million in that fund and the folks in West Texas can do it more cheaply and the folks in East Texas and the West Texans get lower electric bills. Now, my low-income friends will fight us all about equity and stuff like that, but let's make the market work for energy efficiency just like it has done in the past for power supply. And we need to come up with an intermediary and a creation that is enabled to make market rules work. Well, we've got a great one in ERCOT. Let's just have them do what they've done so well on the generation side.
Good, thank you. Ross? 1 second, Rick. Did everybody hear that? No. So the question was, basically, has CPS looked into nearer term or intermediate use of storage, which is becoming more cost effective than was obvious just a short while ago?
Sure. So we've done, I would say we've done a bunch of paperwork, right? Paperwork to me is great theory. So one of the first things I've tried to introduce within CPS Energy is to start kicking off some battery projects. And there's a gentleman from NREL that was up here earlier. Actually, we just won an award with NREL and Duke Energy and another company to do a microgrid and battery storage project on Joint Base San Antonio at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. Next up, we'll be doing a much larger battery storage project that will pair with one of our Alamo projects, a 5.5 megawatt utility scale one, as well as around 70 clustered solar DG facilities. We have some nice theory on paper that says it may work and that may do some great things. I'd like to move beyond paper and theory and actually go into practical reality and actually put some in place and see what happens. That being said, I'm optimistic about it. I actually helped put in or designed the systems at No Trees here in West Texas, which was for a while there, I think, the largest renewables and battery storage pairing that had been done here in the United States.
I think it still is.
Yep, and of course several other battery storage projects at Duke. So I look forward to doing the same here in San Antonio, and hopefully the economics play out for us.
And those who say storage won't work are all wandering around cell phones. I don't know about you, but my first cell phone 20 years ago was about 5 times the size. Most of it was the battery. Average battery today is 1/20th the size it was in that first cell phone and 10 times more powerful. Now, I will certainly cuss it at about 8 hours, 6 or 7 in terms of cell phone use in the day because it doesn't work as well as I would like it to. But I am getting 6 or 7 hours out of a cell phone battery. So things don't ever change, products never improve, and storage will never work.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, what's the lifespan of a solar panel?
So the question is, what's the lifespan of a solar panel? Who wants it?
Well, I'll tell you in about 20 years. Well, no, they've done a lot of testing, they've done a lot of evaluation, and the models are showing that they should last anywhere from 20 to 25 years. And no doubt the technology is getting better. I'm with you, and it will last longer. 20 to 25 years, though, you know, that's pretty good. I'll be at retirement age, so I'm thinking that's a pretty good asset.
And is there a basis of somebody walking through going, oh, this one looks like it's had it, and we're gonna put a new one, I mean, I'm
Yes.
sorry to be ignorant, I just don't know.
So I have a funny story on that one. So at Duke, we put in a 2.2 megawatt test facility at all different kinds of solar panels. It was a beautiful facility. Anybody wants to go see it, I can point you to where it is up in the north side of Charlotte. It's so wonderful that when I brought my team from CPS Energy out there to see it, all the grass had grown up, and a bunch of the panels were all kind of floppy. And I said, hey, you know, this is a great site. What are you guys doing with it? And they said, no, nothing. So, I mean, yeah, panels live a long time, but I would say that just as important with that is that we do need to have a robust program to continue to maintain them. And, you know, I don't want to, with all this stuff, I don't want to play. I don't want to create a fun experiment. I want to figure out how to make it work, how to make it affordable, how to make it reliable, and how to make it integrated into our system. And, you know, I think there are plenty of great models that work out there. I don't necessarily think that everybody's giving it the same level of rigor that they should.
Thank you.
And a lot of the solar panels that were first installed in space are still operating 50 years later. Now, they're not nearly as efficient as they were, but we put solar on our house and paid $1.23 a watt in April of 2012. In September of 2013, we bought solar panels at a wholesale price of 61 cents a watt, and the warranty had been extended 5 years in just basically 15 months. And so we're now getting major corporations, German corporations in this case, because of all their experience, who are saying all of our estimates about how efficient those panels are going to be after 25 years were way too conservative. And so, you know, that kind of change is happening in solar panels very rapidly. And, you know, I'll give you a call when we wear the first one out completely.
Yeah, one other point about that. So solar panels are following the same trend that Moore's law states. You know, Moore's law talks about the efficiency of the processor relative to its cost, and that it essentially doubles about every 18 months. Our industry is actually seeing 4 major trends. That one, Metcalfe's law, which says the value of a grid is based on how much can be interconnected to it. And the more you can interconnect, the more valuable it is. The third one is big data analytics, and of course the fourth one is distributed energy resources. And what all of this is happening is doing is it's changing our business model and giving our customers choice. And if we don't embrace choice and change in business model, we're kind of kidding ourselves about what we do as a business.
Thank you. Dr. Haverl.
Yeah, I've heard several people talk about energy storage, and I was wondering what near-term options you see, and perhaps what long-term options are on the horizon, and what do you mean by energy storage?
So once again, I'll belie my North Carolina and East Coast roots, which I always think of like pump storage, right? I always think of lakes and dams and things like that. Sadly, I noticed in San Antonio we do not have a lot of water. I was surprised. That being said, you know, I think storage writ large, you know, it could be everything from compressed air to where you have hydro. It could be that. It can be battery storage. Frankly, on battery storage, I'm kind of hoping California does it first and does it wrong, and that we all learn from them and not on their dime, or not on our dime. That being said, I think there are a lot of different things to store. Everything from, you've heard of the ice bear solutions, where you store, you make ice, and then there's just plenty of different options. Basically, the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to consider in the portfolio. It's really what's cost effective and what meets the operational portfolio or operational characteristics you want to have.
And storage we've been doing energy storage in Texas since the early 1930s. And if you think about our natural gas system, the way we maintain a reliable natural gas system is by compressing large amounts of it and putting it in salt caverns, and then letting it out both to maintain pressure, but to be able to deal with Yankees that are freezing at the worst in the wintertime. Or conversely, when we're all overheating down here, they ship it our way. And, you know, we have a lot of experience, more experience than anybody else. And for those people who say, we don't have the technology to do energy storage, but on the other hand, coming out the other side of their mouth say, oh, we know how to store radioactive waste for, 250,000 years, I just have to say you're pretty schizophrenic. We know how to do energy storage and been doing it a lot longer. We've been storing that radioactive waste stuff, and that seems to be not working very well.
What's your guess about what will happen with it? Oh, okay. So what's your guess about what will happen with investment tax credits and production
So
tax credits?
there are three points I want to make. If you look at the subsidies going to the gas companies, the gas industry, the coal industry, or the nuclear industry, and look at it by comparison on a dollar-to-dollar basis, it's about 8 times greater for all of those things than it is for renewables. Secondly, if you look at where renewables are, they are in the deepest, reddest parts of this country. And in those parts of the country, when you talk about renewables, people talk about jobs. They talk about being able to open up the Dairy Queen in McCamey, Texas for the first time since 1970, being able to build a new motel and bringing our kids home from the cities and putting them back to work. And so when last time we tried the Congress said, well, we're going to eliminate the subsidies for wind and the investment tax credit, the Republican leadership in those communities said, wait a minute. That's how we're building new schools. That's how we're financing our hospitals. And we want more of that investment in our communities. So I understand the political prognosis is dim, but when people start to talk seriously about doing that, the people back home get pretty upset because that's what's putting their communities back to work.
Interesting. Let me, Doug? Yes. So the question is about the information on Rayford's map, and I didn't hear the last part of the question. Did you get it? If you did, repeat it.
Yeah.
How much accounting rigor is EPA going to expect or require? Okay.
Especially for the
For
efficiency.
energy efficiency in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah, last week, I guess it was, we put out, information about the rate versus mass. We put out, I believe it was announced while we were in the 1 o'clock session today, an announcement about a visualization tool that actually helps you understand that a little bit more. We think that, the mass approach, and it's something, we're still taking comment on, and so this is just preliminary type discussion. Some states, that'll be the easiest way for them to make their goal, especially states that have reductions planned based on other rules. For Hayes, for example, in Oklahoma, they're talking about, taking out several coal-fired power plants for that, doing that in New Mexico. New Mexico, it'd be very, very easy for them to meet their goal based on the retirements alone. There is the potential, if we had to create a federal plan, it would probably be based on a mass approach from discussion we've had, because it's just simpler and it'd be easier to come out with a national rule for that. Your question about the energy efficiency, that's something that is going to be hard, because the plans that states provide have to be federally enforceable, and energy efficiency that your agency and others like it are usually the people who are not involved at all, with enforcement, and so that's that. We've tried to figure out if you're going to track down every refrigerator you pay for and see if it's being used appropriately, and that the old refrigerator was retired and taken away. And so we've tried to figure out how it could be a clunker program, or something like that, to make sure it doesn't just go to the garage to hold beer, and that it would actually come offline and you'd replace with a better refrigerator. And how do you do that? And that's one of the harder questions that we think is, the rule will have to flesh that out a lot more, because the efficiency thing is not really done by the traditional regulated community. It's done by other organizations which are not traditionally regulated or regulating agencies.
So one other point on that. So California Practice Manual, which is obviously for California, but it states a lot of rules in terms of how you determine actual energy efficiency impacts for programs. And my previous employer, even though we were on the East Coast, and we did not like to use the word California in our regulatory proceedings, lest we lose our head attached to our body. But we essentially utilized that to approve and have a third-party evaluator come in and demonstrate statistically that we had achieved the results that we thought we had. That was good enough for 5 different states at the time that we were regulated in to approve our model. It was important because we got paid completely on just the benefits that we actually achieved for our programs. We didn't get any cost recovery at all. And so our regulators were very concerned about proving statistically that our results were accurate. And this is essentially how we did it. We used the California Practice Manual, and we hired third-party evaluator, measurement, and verification companies to do it for us.
If I could follow up on that with Rob, and then I'll get back to you. Sorry. Let's say that someone proposes, a state proposes that they will have an energy efficiency element, and it's got an accounting model associated with it, a verification model, and they don't get all of the efficiencies that they got. Is there some mechanism proposed to either make them get more efficiency or to make that up with, with one of their other building blocks?
Well, one of the things that's important to remember is that, we're going to be looking at interim goals and where you are from 2020 to 2030.
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that there's going to be, little blips up and down, and that it's a 3-year rolling average during that time period, so you may be able to capture that back. I think if, part of the way through and it looks like you're not getting anything, your plan could have in it, and this is, I'm not a lawyer, so, kind of
Right for this,
cautionary
I'll tell you.
saying, is whether or not, you could have an automatic kick in the plan that, if we're not meeting this by 2022, we're going to have to shift to a different approach, or if you would have to come in and amend the plan. It depends on
Okay.
some legal interpretations of how you could do that.
Thank you. So the question is, excuse me, Rob, the question is whether what Texas has been doing already in order to count the emissions benefits, and NOx in particular, currently, although the same e-grid system counts or tracks carbon, is it considered that that system would be able to provide some accounting?
I think it certainly, would provide evidence that, there's a system in place and one that's been managed and understood and things like that. Really depends on what the plan Texas submits includes and how they're going to show that. The one slight misnomer is that we loosely talk about, it's a SIP that will be coming in. It's actually in a different section of the Clean Air Act, and it doesn't have all the same bells and whistles that the traditional SIPs do. And so there are, opportunities, I think, to look at, things differently.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? Keith?
Any discussion you think about solar incentives for the state of Texas? Other states have done it. I think CPS has done solar incentives for its customers in Austin. Where do you have any discussions about that?
No. And the answer is we came close a couple of years ago, but now any conversation about a new RPS or a statewide solar incentive are virtually dead. That's the bad news. The good news is now solar is so cheap that it is below the cost of building a new natural gas plant. Let me say that again. We're below grid parity on an installation of new utility scale solar. What we saw in Austin and what we're seeing in bids around the state are that new solar plants are coming in at below a nickel a kilowatt hour for future generation. The estimates of Austin Energy were a new gas plant would cost them 6.1 cents. ERCOT looked at that same set of data and said probably 6.9 cents a kilowatt hour. Coal is up around somewhere around 10 cents, and nuclear is well north of 12. So, we're at the point where solar no longer is going to need a whole lot of incentive for people to buy it. In many cities, San Antonio, Austin, some of the big green power providers in the state are beginning to look at time of use rates. And so if you're starting to look at energy that's being produced by solar on your roof and how it shaves the peak power costs, it becomes a no-brainer The big thing that we're missing is financing. And we now have a lot of private party entities that are coming in to finance solar for your roof, either as a direct purchase or as a lease. I know that there's conversations going on among some of the co-ops about doing some sort of a loan program. And I hope that Rayford and I will have that conversation here pretty quick about CPS financing. We've got to fix some laws to make that happen. But, you know, that's where the utilities can make money off of something that otherwise would reduce their revenue, is by leasing or selling you that solar, you can make as much money on the margin as you can selling electricity on throughput. And it's a whole lot cheaper because you have to build all those transmission lines and upgrades to everything else.
You want to comment on that, or the PPAs or anything? Or have a last word generally?
Okay, so yes, as a matter of fact, CPS recently announced a new solar PPA program, solar DG PPA program, to do essentially that. It's not quite financing in the traditional sense, but it is a very similar idea of how do we get more in the business of providing customers what they're looking for, which is this sort of a service. And I hope that with that program, with the community solar RFP that we have out on the street, and then certainly with our innovative solar programs that we have in San Antonio, that we see far more renewables than we have currently.
Thank you. And with that, we are right at 5. Please help me say thank you to Rayford Smith, Smitty Smith, and Rob Lawrence.